Pretty thing, aren't you? The woman said, stepping closer. Must be hard, being second. Excuse me? Lara asked, confused. The woman sipped her wine. You do know you're not the first, right? And you'll never be the last. I was with him before Evelyn. He has a pattern. He collects women like their memories and burns them when they're no longer useful. Lara's stomach tightened. You're lying. I was in that greenhouse with him once, the woman continued, eyes glittering with venom. He kissed me where the orchids bloom, told me he'd never loved anyone the way he loved me, and then he left me for a girl with prettier lies. Lara's voice was tight. You should leave. Oh, honey, she said with a smirk. You'll wish you had. Lara walked away, her breath uneven, the words clawing at her chest. She was heading back toward the main hall when she felt a hand grip her arm, too tightly. She spun around. A man in a gray suit, one she didn't recognize, was smirking down at her. Hey, you must be the new bride, he slurred. He reeked of gin and entitlement. I heard he picked you from the gutter. Did he fix you yet? Let go of me, Lara hissed, struggling against him. He leaned closer. I wonder if you taste like pity. Suddenly he was gone. Damien had slammed him against the stone pillar with one brutal movement. His hand gripped the man's throat, his eyes dark with fury. If you touch her again, he said in a low, violent whisper, I will break every bone in your body and feed them to my dogs. The man gasped, clawing at Damien's arm. Lara placed a trembling hand on Damien's shoulder. Damien, stop, please. He hesitated, then dropped the man, who collapsed to the ground, gasping. Damien turned to her, his chest heaving. You're bleeding, she said, noticing the red scrape on his knuckles. He looked down, then back at her. For a moment he seemed disoriented, like something had snapped inside him and hadn't returned. She took his hand gently. Come with me. They walked silently back into the mansion, past the murmuring guests and stunned staff. She led him into the sitting room, grabbing a first aid kit from the drawer. Until he sat on the edge of the couch, tense, watching her. You didn't have to do that, she whispered, as she dabbed his knuckles with antiseptic. He touched you, he said. He insulted me. That's different. No, he said. It's not. She looked up. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were wild. Why do you care? She asked. He didn't answer immediately. Then in a voice so quiet it cracked. Because you don't see me the way they do. Her hands stilled. You look at me like I'm human, he continued, and it's the one thing I don't know how to live with. A silence bloomed between them, honest, intimate. Lara Ocon had never believed in monsters, not the ones that lurked beneath children's beds or the ones that haunted old folk tales. But that was before the call came, before her younger brother's life was placed on a scale and her body was the weight that could tip it back into balance. The sun was setting over Lagos when Lara stood outside the old mechanic shop in Surulere, heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. The air smelled of burnt rubber and petrol, and her white blouse clung to her back with sweat and worry. Her hands trembled as she reached for the rusted gate, its groan echoing like a warning. Are you Lara? A man with tribal marks and sun-darkened skin asked, stepping out from the shadows of the shop. Yes, she replied, voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, opened the gate wider, and gestured. Follow me. Olga is expecting you. Olga. The words settled like a weight in her stomach. She was led into a cramped office at the back. The walls were lined with tools, and the smell of grease clung to the air like a second skin. Seated behind a metal desk was the man who had called her earlier Chief Remy, one of the most notorious moneylenders in the city. His smile was thin and sharp. You're prettier than I expected, he said, eyeing her. But beauty doesn't pay debts. I'm not here for compliments, Lara snapped. I'm here to settle Emeka's debt. Chief Remy chuckled. Settle? My dear, your brother owes me 50 million lira, with interest climbing every week. I should have cut off a finger by now. Lara's voice shook. Please, he's just a boy. He didn't know what he was doing. And yet he did it anyway. He played with sharks thinking he was a dolphin. I'll find a way to pay. You, a nurse earning N150,000 a month? It would take you a lifetime, and I don't have that kind of patience. She clenched her fists. Then why call me here? Remy leaned back, eyes gleaming. Because someone else made an offer, one that benefits us both. Your brother's debt cleared in full, and you married into one of Lagos's wealthiest families. Lara blinked. What? He slid a brown envelope across the table. A contract, marriage legally binding, 6 months minimum. After that, you can walk away, alive with your brother intact and debt-free. She opened the envelope. Her eyes fell on the name. Damian Chuka Uzo. Her breath caught. Is this some kind of joke? She asked. No joke. You've heard of him, I assume? He didn't wait for an answer. The man with the Banana Island fortress. The one people say killed his wife. Burned half his face in the process. People call him the monster of Banana Island. Lara's mouth went dry. He saw your photo, asked for you, said he liked your spirit. That's sick, she said. Maybe, but it's also your brother's only way out. The silence that followed was deafening. Think about it, Remy added. A few months, no debts, no funeral. You'll be taken care of, and you'll live in a mansion most girls only see on Instagram. Nang, Lara stood. I need time. You have 24 hours. That night, Lara couldn't sleep. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. Family is everything, Lara. When the world turns its back, we must hold each other tighter. She stared at the cracked ceiling of her one-room apartment, listening to the hum of generators outside and the occasional blare of Danfo horns. Emeka's face flashed before her eyes, bruised, bloodied, scared. She could not bury another sibling. Their parents had died in a car accident 4 years ago. Lara had become mother, sister, and protector all in one breath. Emeka was all she had left. She sat up and reached for her rosary. If this is what it takes, she whispered to the quiet room, then I'll become his bride. The next afternoon, Lara was driven in a black Mercedes with tinted windows to Banana Island. The contrast was jarring, the potholes of Yaba behind her, and now smooth roads lined with palm trees, marble gates, and mansions, worth more than the GDP of some countries. The car pulled up in front of a massive estate with high gray walls and armed guards at the gate. As the gate opened, Lara saw the mansion. It looked more like a museum. Cold, distant, imposing. She was led inside by a silent female housekeeper who wore all black. The air smelled of fresh eucalyptus and something sterile, like a hospital. The living room alone could fit her entire apartment 10 times over. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers. Walls covered in abstract art that felt angry, fractured. And then she saw him, Damian Chuka Uzo. He stood at the top of the staircase, one side of his face smooth, striking, even beautiful. But the other side bore scars, deep, textured burns that twisted the skin across his jaw and temple. One eye was slightly lower than the other, and yet his presence was thunderous. Miss Oken, he said, his voice deep, detached. Mr. Uzo, she replied, lifting her chin. I assume you understand the terms. I do. No affection is required. No intimacy unless initiated by you. I won't touch you unless you ask. You're free to leave the mansion during daylight hours. But at night, you stay here. She nodded, barely breathing. You'll find that I'm not a monster, Miss Oken, he added after a pause. But I also don't offer second chances. Neither do I. His lips curved slightly, but it wasn't a smile. Very well. The ceremony is tomorrow. Wear black. Black? She asked, surprised. In this house, we do not pretend to celebrate what was never a choice. The next morning, Lara stood in front of the full-length mirror in a black satin gown, sleeveless and modest, the kind that whispered elegance without demanding attention. Her hair was styled into a low bun, and her lips held no trace of color. She looked like a bride mourning her own wedding day. The mansion buzzed with silence. There were no flowers, no laughter, no scent of celebration. Just cold air and the sound of ticking clocks that echoed from somewhere deep inside the house. The ceremony was to take place in the main study. Not a church, not a registry, just a room filled with law books and shadows. Two witnesses, the housekeeper and a quiet man in a navy suit who looked like he hadn't smiled in 10 years. Damien stood beside her in an all-black tuxedo. He hadn't shaved. His face bore no expression, no warmth, no pride, not even contempt. Only distance, and that haunting scar. The officiant was a young reverend Lara had never seen before. He didn't ask if either party wanted to say vows. There were no rings, only a pen and 2 signatures. When it was done, Damien looked at her and said, "You may move into the East Wing. Dinner is served at 8 p.m. You're expected to attend. Beyond that, stay out of the West Wing. That side of the house is not yours to explore." Lara nodded once. "Understood." No kiss, no picture, no guess. Just a contract and a name she now carried like a locked chain around her neck. Mrs. Lara Uzo. She followed the housekeeper, Auntie Dora, a stern woman in her 50s, down a hallway lined with ancestral portraits and into a room so large it felt like a hotel suite. Ivory walls, tall windows, and a 4-poster bed carved with ancient symbols. The closet alone was larger than her entire flat back in Yaba. "Anything you need," Auntie Dora said, her voice clipped. "You speak to me." "Thank you." A pause. The older woman's gaze softened for just a moment. "He isn't what people say he is," she said under her breath. "But that doesn't mean he's safe either." And with that cryptic warning, she turned and left. Lara didn't leave the room until dinner. She spent the rest of the day staring out the window at the garden below, where roses bloomed in perfect symmetry. There was a greenhouse at the far end, locked with chains. No staff wandered near it. By 8 p.m., she entered the grand dining hall. It was absurd. A table long enough to seat 30, but only 2 chairs were occupied, hers and Damien's. Candles flickered in gold holders. Soft violin music played from hidden speakers. He didn't stand as she entered, just gestured toward the opposite end of the table. Yeah, they ate in silence for the first 10 minutes. Grilled lamb, pumpkin soup, and something French she couldn't pronounce. The food was exquisite, but Laura's throat felt too tight to swallow. Finally, she asked, "Why me?" Damien looked up, his fork pausing midair. "You had a reputation for loyalty," he said. "You once turned down a N5 million bribe to cover up a patient's malpractice file. That impressed me. You've been investigating me?" "I investigate everything I invite into my home." "And your wife?" she asked carefully. "Did you investigate her too?" He lowered his fork. "You're not to mention Evelyn again," he said, voice quiet but sharp. "Ever." Lara felt the air shift. "I wasn't trying to offend. You live here now, Lara. You will be protected, provided for. But do not mistake this for a fairy tale. You chose this, and that choice has boundaries." "I chose to save my brother," she said, her voice low but steady. "And I'll never apologize for that." Damien studied her. For a moment, something unreadable flickered in his eyes. Then he looked away. "You may leave." That night, Lara couldn't sleep. She wandered the hallway outside her room, barefoot on marble, the mansion whispering secrets in the silence. She walked past paintings too dark to enjoy, mirrors that seemed to warp her reflection, and doors that were always locked, until she found the West Wing. Its entrance was marked by 2 tall ebony doors with golden line handles. One of the locks had been recently changed. She stepped closer, curious. Suddenly a voice came from behind her. "You're not supposed to be here." She jumped and spun around. A young woman, maybe mid-30s, stood in the shadows, holding a laundry basket. "I'm sorry," Lara said quickly. The woman shook her head. "It's not safe. That side of the house, it holds things better left alone." "Like what?" "Like memories that bleed," she whispered. and ghosts that don't forget. Before Lara could ask anything else, the woman turned and vanished down the corridor. The next morning, Lara awoke to find a single white rose on her nightstand. No note, just the flower, freshly cut, dewy. She picked it up slowly, her fingers brushing the soft petals. Damien had told her he didn't want affection, that he didn't expect a wife, only a roommate with a legal ring. But this rose, it felt intentional. She walked to the balcony and looked down into the rose garden. For a moment, she saw a shadow move near the greenhouse. A tall figure, barefoot, bare-armed, standing among the petals as though lost in thought. And then he turned. It was Damien. Their eyes met across the yard, hers wide with questions, his unreadable. He nodded once, and then he walked away. The mansion had a heartbeat of its own. Lara noticed it after her third day as Mrs. Uzo, the way the chandeliers tinkled faintly even when there was no breeze, the way some walls seemed to hum late at night. It was as though the house breathed, groaned, and remembered things its occupants tried to forget. She kept to herself, as expected. She took her breakfast in the small courtyard, away from Damien's presence, and spent her afternoons wandering the East Wing, making mental notes of rooms she hadn't dared enter yet. The West Wing remained locked, but its silence grew louder. It wasn't long before the whispers began. It started with one of the kitchen maids, a timid girl named Ada, who was stacking plates in the pantry when Lara entered unannounced. The girl startled, dropping a porcelain dish. "I'm sorry, madam," she gasped, bowing repeatedly. "I didn't hear you come in." "It's all right," Lara said, helping her pick up the shards. "Are you new?" Ada shook her head quickly. "No, Ma. Been here since Madam Evelyn." Lara froze. Ada looked up and paled instantly. I shouldn't have said that. You can speak freely. I won't report you." The girl hesitated. People don't talk about her. Not aloud. Not even Auntie Dora. But why? Because the last person who did, he left and never returned. Lara's brows drew together. "What do you mean?" "I mean, he vanished. Like she did." The plate in Lara's hand slipped slightly. "She vanished?" she repeated. "I thought she died." Ada's mouth trembled, and she leaned in. "That's what they say, but no one ever saw her body. No funeral. Just one morning, she was gone. And Olga, he stopped speaking to anyone for months. Locked himself in that West Wing, and when he came out, he was half burned. The fire happened days after she disappeared. No one knows what caused it." Lara felt cold creep into her chest. "What was she like?" she asked softly. Ada hesitated. "Beautiful. Fierce. She had a voice that could make men tremble. But she wasn't warm. Not to the staff. Not even to Olga." "And did he love her?" The girl shook her head slowly. "I don't know if that man's capable of love, Ma, but he did fear her. Or maybe he feared what she made him become." That night, Lara lay in bed with her eyes open, heart pounding. She had signed the contract expecting coldness, distance, but fear was new. Everything about Damien was controlled, measured, but what kind of man lives in a house full of locked rooms and half-buried secrets? What kind of man loses a wife without a body? She rose and pulled on her robe, walking barefoot down the silent hallway, guided only by the pale moonlight from the arched windows. The mansion felt even larger at night, more echo than space, more shadows than light. She passed the library, the piano room, the art gallery, then stopped. A soft sound, a door creaking open, the door to the study. She stepped closer, quietly. Inside, Damien stood in front of the fireplace, staring into the flames like they were whispering back. He wore a black silk robe, the scarred side of his face partially hidden in shadow. He didn't look at her when he spoke. "Couldn't sleep either?" She froze. "I heard something. Thought maybe it was a power surge." "It wasn't," he said flatly. "I didn't mean to intrude. You're not intruding. You live here." His voice had softened, just slightly. She stepped inside the room slowly. "You're burning something." He turned slightly, revealing the edge of a torn photo slipping into the fire. "Was that her?" Silence. Then, "Yes." "You still keep her picture?" "It's the last one," he replied. "The rest are gone." "Why did you keep it?" "Because for a long time I wanted to remember what betrayal looked like." Lara stepped closer. Her heart thundered in her ears. "People say you killed her." He turned fully now, meeting her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Do you believe them?" "I don't know you," she said quietly. "I want to believe what I see, but sometimes I'm not sure what I'm looking at." His jaw tensed. "She left me for someone who wanted my legacy, used me, set a fire that was meant to destroy this house. And me, I survived. She didn't." Her lips parted. "So you did find her body?" "No," he said. "She vanished into smoke, and with her went the man I used to be." A beat passed. "Do you still see her?" she asked. "Every night." The next day, Lara found herself wandering again. This time she ended up in the garden. The gardener, a hunched man named Jacob, was pruning the hedges near the greenhouse when she walked past. "You shouldn't linger here, madam," he said. "Why not?" He glanced toward the greenhouse. "Too many things grew in that glass house. Not all of them flowers. I saw Damien here one morning. He comes when he misses her, or when he's angry." "Did she spend time here?" Jacob hesitated. "She kept her journals in there. Said the air helped her think. Some staff used to say she'd walk around barefoot, whispering to the orchids, talking to herself, like she knew she was being watched." "Watched by who?" But Jacob had already walked away. That evening, during dinner, Lara tried to keep her tone light. "I hear the greenhouse used to be hers," she said, cutting into a roasted yam wedge. Damien didn't look up. "It's locked for a reason." "Do you miss her?" He met her eyes then, the scarred half of his face catching the light. "I miss who I thought she was." "What if she came back?" He didn't flinch. "I'd kill her." Lara couldn't shake his words. "I'd kill her." The cold finality in Damien's voice had lingered long after the dinner plates were cleared. That night she stared at the ceiling, listening to the quiet creaks of the house, imagining what kind of love could sour into hatred so complete. In the early morning she sat by her bedroom window, hugging her knees. Across the garden the greenhouse loomed like a memory locked in glass. She didn't fear him. Not entirely, but she feared the shadows that clung to him. The ghosts he tried to silence. And more than that, she feared the ache growing in her chest whenever she thought of him. Not as a monster, but as a man broken by grief and betrayal. Later that week the mansion came alive. Briefly. Damien was hosting a charity gala in collaboration with the Uzo Foundation. It was to raise money for burn survivors and victims of domestic violence. A carefully curated crowd of Lagos elite would attend, all eager to parade their philanthropy in sequins and velvet. Auntie Dora entered Lara's room with a gold gown draped across her arm. "Olga says to wear this." Lara touched the fabric. It was soft, elegant, the kind of dress that belonged in magazines, not on a nurse from Yaba who had married a billionaire to save her brother. "You think I look like his wife?" she asked quietly. Auntie Dora's gaze softened. "You look like the only person who hasn't tried to take something from him." The mansion shimmered with chandeliers that night. String quartets played softly in the garden. Waiters moved like ghosts in black suits, and paparazzi flashed their cameras as luxury cars pulled into the estate. Lara descended the staircase in the gold gown, her hair swept into a loose updo, her skin glowing under the warm lights. Guests turned, eyes widening. They had heard the rumors that Damien had remarried, that the new bride was quiet, different. Now they saw her, and they whispered. Damien met her at the bottom of the stairs, dressed in a black tuxedo with a deep green pocket square. He looked dangerous, refined, like a man who commanded a room without ever raising his voice. "You clean up well," he said, offering his arm. "You almost sound impressed," she replied. "I'm always watching." His words unsettled her, but it was the way he looked at her that confused her more. Not with possession, but with a strange protectiveness she couldn't explain. The event flowed smoothly, until it didn't. Demian was called aside by an investor. Lara wandered near the fountain, trying to avoid the prying eyes of a woman in a red satin gown, who had been watching her all evening, with a mocking smile. "Pretty thing, aren't you?" the woman said, stepping closer. "Must be hard, being second." "Excuse me?" Lara asked, confused. The woman sipped her wine. "You do know you're not the first, right? And you'll never be the last. I was with him before Evelyn. He has a pattern. He collects women like their memories and burns them when they're no longer useful." Lara's stomach tightened. "You're lying." "I was in that greenhouse with him once," the woman continued, eyes glittering with venom. "He kissed me where the orchids bloom, told me he'd never loved anyone the way he loved me, and then he left me for a girl with prettier lies." Lara's voice was tight. "You should leave." "Oh, honey," she said with a smirk. "You'll wish you had." Lara walked away, her breath uneven, the words clawing at her chest. She was heading back toward the main hall when she felt a hand grip her arm, too tightly. She spun around. A man in a gray suit, one she didn't recognize, was smirking down at her. "Hey, you must be the new bride," he slurred. He reeked of gin and entitlement. "I heard he picked you from the gutter. Did he fix you yet?" "Let go of me," Lara hissed, struggling against him. He leaned closer. "I wonder if you taste like pity." Suddenly he was gone. Demian had slammed him against the stone pillar with one brutal movement. His hand gripped the man's throat, his eyes dark with fury. "If you touch her again," he said in a low, violent whisper, "I will break every bone in your body and feed them to my dogs." The man gasped, clawing at Demian's arm. Lara placed a trembling hand on Demian's shoulder. "Demian, stop! Please!" He hesitated, then dropped the man, who collapsed to the ground, gasping. Demian turned to her, his chest heaving. "You're bleeding," she said, noticing the red scrape on his knuckles. He looked down, then back at her. For a moment he seemed disoriented, like something had snapped inside him and hadn't returned. She took his hand gently. "Come with me." They walked silently back into the mansion, past the murmuring guests and stunned staff. She led him into the sitting room, grabbing a first aid kit from the drawer. Until he sat on the edge of the couch, tense, watching her. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered, as she dabbed his knuckles with antiseptic. "He touched you," he said. "He insulted me. That's different." "No," he said. "It's not." She looked up. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were wild. "Why do you care?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. Then in a voice so quiet it cracked, "Because you don't see me the way they do." Her hands stilled. "You look at me like I'm human," he continued, "and it's the one thing I don't know how to live with." A silence bloomed between them, honest, intimate. "I used to think strength meant being in control all the time," he said, "but the strongest I've ever felt was when I admitted I needed you." Lara stared at him. "I don't want to control you," he added. "I don't want to own you or tie you down. I just want the honor of walking beside you." She swallowed hard. She didn't say anything, just wrapped his hand gently in bandage and pressed her palm over his. Neither of them moved. For the first time since she entered the mansion, Lara didn't feel like a prisoner. She felt seen. The morning after the gala, the mansion was unusually quiet. Even the staff moved slower, as if reluctant to disturb the echo of what had happened. The incident with the drunken man hadn't made the tabloids. Demian's PR team had done their job well. But Lara could feel the shift in the air. Demian had not appeared at breakfast. His absence felt heavier than his presence ever had. Lara wandered through the East Wing after her meal, her mind buzzing with questions. Why did he react so violently? What was it about her that pulled the humanity out of a man everyone called a monster? She paused at a hallway she rarely entered. Something pulled her forward. She walked past a series of doors until she found one that stood out, not for its size, but for its color. A deep, wine-red door. The doorknob was cool under her hand and, surprisingly, unlocked. She hesitated, then pushed. The room was dim, lit only by soft sunlight seeping through drawn curtains. Dust danced in the air like faded memories. What caught her breath, though, were the paintings, hundreds of them. Canvas upon canvas leaned against the walls, some stacked in corners, others hanging from ornate hooks. Each one a portrait of a woman, some serene, some wild-eyed, some crying, some laughing. All of them bore a resemblance to one another. All of them bore a resemblance to Evelyn. But one painting, tucked in the farthest corner, made Lara step closer. It wasn't Evelyn. It was her. Not exactly. The lips were fuller, the eyes slightly wider, but the woman in the painting wore a blue nurse uniform. Her skin shimmered in warm tones. She was holding a red flower, her expression calm, almost loving. Lara's hands trembled. She'd never posed for this. She had never worn this color before. And yet, here she was. A soft rustle behind her made her spin. Damien stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. "You weren't supposed to see this room," he said. "I didn't know it was locked," she replied quietly. "I just followed the hallway." He stepped in slowly. "This was my retreat, years ago, before everything. Why did you paint me?" He walked past her to the canvas. His fingers brushed the frame. "I didn't," he said, "not consciously. I painted her years before I met you, after Evelyn disappeared. I told myself I was just painting from memory, or from imagination. But when I saw you that day in the hospital with your brother, I realized I'd painted you long before you existed in my world." Lara couldn't find her voice. Damien turned to her, something vulnerable flickering in his gaze. "It terrified me." "You think I'm her?" she asked. "No, but there's something in you that reminds me of the version of her I wished had been real." "That's not fair to me," she said. "I'm not a ghost, Damien. I bleed. I feel. I'm not here to live in her shadow." "I know," he said, "and I don't want you to be her." "Then stop looking at me like I'm some prophecy you painted into life." The room fell silent. Finally, he said, "I'm sorry." Lara turned back to the painting. "Was Evelyn always like how people described her?" "No," he said. "At first she was light, unpredictable, but beautiful. She made me feel alive. But then she changed. She began to lie, manipulate, gaslight. She was cheating with someone close to me. I still don't know the full truth." "And then she disappeared?" Damien nodded. "We had a fight. She threatened to expose me, told me everything I loved would turn to ash. The next day, the fire happened. I woke up in a hospital with burns. The police found traces of accelerant. No body, just her necklace in the ashes." Lara closed her eyes. "You think she set the fire?" "I don't think," he said bitterly. "I know." "Why didn't you say anything?" "I did, but no one believed me. Not the media, not the board, not the staff. They called me a killer, the man who destroyed the woman he loved. And you believed them too." His silence was answer enough. That night, Lara didn't return to her room. She walked back to the Scarlet Room. Not to confront anything, but to understand. She stared at the painting of herself for a long time. Was this fate, coincidence? Or had Damien manifested her, dreamed her into existence before either of them had met? A dusty journal on the floor caught her attention. She picked it up, flipping through the pages. It wasn't his handwriting. It was Evelyn's. "I know he watches me paint, but he doesn't know I see him. He thinks I don't notice the way he stares at my reflection in the glass. I can feel him slipping, becoming someone else." Lara read more. I told him tonight I'd be gone soon. He didn't believe me. He will. When the flames come. She slammed the journal shut, her pulse racing. He wasn't lying. Evelyn had planned it. She had written it. And yet, what had pushed her to that point? The woman in the journal sounded disturbed, but also desperate, like someone crying out before she vanished. Lara returned the journal to its spot, then sat beside the painting. She didn't notice how long she stayed there. The night bled into early morning, and when she finally stood, a blanket had been laid over her shoulders. She looked up to see Damien at the door. He didn't speak. He only nodded once before turning away. And for the first time, Lara didn't feel like a stranger in the mansion. She felt like someone he had finally let in. The storm came without warning. One moment, the sky was a lazy gray. The next, thunder cracked through Banana Island like a warning shot. Rain poured in thick, furious waves, turning the garden paths to glistening rivers and painting the windows with streaks of water. Lara was curled up in the library with a novel she hadn't touched in 2 days, her mind still stuck in Evelyn's journal. The words haunted her. He thinks I don't notice. I told him I'd be gone soon. The lightning outside illuminated the grand shelves and flickers. The house creaked and groaned with the wind. A loud thud echoed from the east corridor. Lara stood immediately. Another thud, sharper this time. Then a muffled groan. She rushed toward the sound, her silk robe trailing behind her. She followed it down the marble hallway, past a hallway of portraits, until she reached the door leading to Damien's private studio. It was open. She stepped inside and froze. Damien was on the floor, shirtless, one hand gripping the edge of the desk, blood dripping from his temple. Shards of broken glass glittered on the floor near an overturned bottle of scotch. "Damien!" she gasped, running to his side. "Leave," he growled, trying to push her away. "Stop it," she said firmly, grabbing a towel from the shelf. "You're hurt." "I said leave." "You're bleeding and drunk, so unless you plan to bleed out on your Italian rug, shut up and let me help you." Something in her tone halted him. He let out a bitter laugh, then winced. She gently pressed the towel to the cut. "What happened?" she asked. "I read her letter, the one she left behind before the fire. I kept it locked away all this time. Thought if I didn't read it, I could control the story." He winced again as she cleaned the wound. She noticed the tremble in his hand. "She blamed me, Lara. Said I turned her into someone unrecognizable. That's not fair. She made her choices." He looked up at her then, and his voice cracked. "What if I did destroy her? What if every woman I touch ends up broken?" Lara's eyes filled with tears. "Then let me be the one to prove you wrong," she whispered. His breath caught. In that moment, everything shifted. Not because of the blood or the storm or the memories, but because for the first time Damien didn't push her away. He let her stay. She helped him to his bed. He sat on the edge, silent, his head in his hands. "Take off your robe," he said suddenly. Lara stiffened. "What?" "Not like that," he said, his voice tired. "It's soaked. You'll get sick. There's a sweater in the closet." She hesitated, then nodded, walking over to grab the warm gray knit sweater and slipping it over her nightdress. When she turned, Damien was lying back against the pillows, eyes closed, face paler than usual. She approached carefully. "You should sleep. I haven't slept without nightmares in years. Do you want me to stay?" He didn't answer. So she sat on the floor beside the bed, folding a blanket over her knees. She could hear the rhythm of his breath. Slower now. Deeper. She reached up and placed her hand gently over his. "I'm not her," she whispered. "And you're not a monster." For a moment, nothing. Then he gripped her fingers. Just barely. But it was enough. When Lara woke, it was still dark, but the storm had passed, and the silence that followed was softer than usual. She sat up, stiff from the floor. Damien was still asleep, peaceful for once. His brow wasn't furrowed, his jaw wasn't clenched. She watched him for a long time. The scar didn't frighten her anymore. In fact, it told a story she now understood. Pain etched into flesh. Memories that refused to fade. But beneath all that, she saw something else. A man fighting to be more than his past. She stood to leave but stopped when his voice broke the silence. "Stay." She turned. He hadn't opened his eyes. "You don't have to sleep on the floor," he murmured. She nodded, walked over, and slipped beneath the covers beside him, careful to keep her body turned slightly away. But moments later, he shifted, his arms sliding around her waist, his forehead resting gently against her back. Lara didn't move. Because this wasn't about sex or ownership. This was about surrender. About a man who had been sleeping beside shadows for years and now wanted something human, something kind to hold. She reached back and touched his hand. And in the dark, they both exhaled for the first time in what felt like forever. The next morning, sunlight poured into the room like gold. Damien was gone when Lara woke, but there was a note on the pillow beside her. "I didn't dream about her last night. I dreamt of rain and fire, but this time I wasn't afraid. Thank you." Her chest tightened. She clutched the note to her heart. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the beginning of something deeper, something real, and that scared her more than anything else. The days after the storm passed gently, like fog lifting after a long rain. There were no grand confessions, no declarations of love, but something between Damien and Lara had quietly shifted. Their conversations were warmer, his voice softer, and while he still spent hours locked in his studio or pacing the gardens alone, he no longer seemed unreachable. That morning, Lara took her tea in the greenhouse. The chains that once sealed it had been removed. "I thought you said this place was locked for a reason," she had said when Damien gave her the key 2 nights ago. He looked at her and said simply, "I trust you." Now, surrounded by orchids and white lilies, the air heavy with the scent of damp soil and blooming secrets, Lara sat on a bench beside a row of wild roses. She wore a simple cotton dress and sandals, her hair braided into a loose crown. As she watched a butterfly flutter from petal to petal, a glint of something buried beneath a rose bush caught her eye. She bent down. Something was lodged in the dirt. Gently, she brushed the soil away until her fingers closed around a small silver locket, tarnished with age. She opened it. Inside was a photo, blurry and old, but unmistakably Evelyn. And beside it, a folded piece of paper, brittle with time. Lara unfolded it with trembling fingers. It wasn't a letter. It was a page torn from a journal. The handwriting was Evelyn's. "If this is ever found, it means someone dared to dig. Good. They should know the truth. He wasn't always the monster. I made him one." Lara's blood ran cold. She read the words again and again. "I made him one." Later that evening, she returned to the Scarlet Room, holding the locket in her palm like a relic. The rain had started again, soft this time like a lullaby, and the house was still. She sat beside Damien's self-portrait of her and stared at it, letting the silence soak her bones. So many versions of Evelyn lived in this mansion. The seductive mistress, the betrayed wife, the cruel manipulator, the lost soul. But this, the journal, the locket, the truth scrawled in her own hand, was the first version that aligned with what Lara had begun to feel in her bones. Damien hadn't killed Evelyn. She had destroyed herself. And him. Later that night, Damien found Lara on the balcony, arms folded over the railing, hair wild from the wind. He walked to her side, quiet. "Why didn't you destroy this place?" she asked without looking at him. "Every corner of this house holds pieces of her." He didn't answer right away. "I thought if I lived with the ghosts," he said, "I could stop them from haunting me." Lara turned to face him. "I found something," she whispered. She handed him the locket. His hands trembled as he opened it. He read the note, and for a long while he said nothing. Only when he looked up, eyes glassy, voice hollow, did he speak. "She knew she was breaking me," he murmured, "and she didn't care. She didn't just break you, Lara said gently. She buried the man you were beneath lies and shame. But you're still here. Damien's throat bobbed. I don't know who I am anymore. You're someone trying, she said. That's more than most. He reached for her hand and held it to his chest. His heartbeat was fast, alive, real. I need to show you something, he said. They walked to the west garden, past the hedges and beneath the large stone statue of a lion that guarded the rear of the property. Lara had never been there before. A stone path led to an underground vault, almost invisible from the main view. He unlocked it with a fingerprint scan. Inside was a dimly lit archive. Old documents, boxes, folders, and a single safe. He opened it and handed her a folder. She flipped through it. Legal files, photos, testimonies, proof. Evelyn was working with a rival corporation, Damien said. They were planning to take over Uzo Enterprises. I'd refused to merge with them. She was the bait, the wife who would destroy me from the inside. Lara's stomach twisted. She planted surveillance, tried to sabotage contracts. When I confronted her, she lost control. She set the fire. I never told anyone because who would believe a billionaire blaming his dead wife? She looked at him. I would have believed you, she said quietly. And in that moment, something inside Damien broke and rebuilt. Not because of the evidence, not even because of the locket, but because someone finally believed in his goodness without needing proof. Later, as they stood beneath the open sky, the scent of wet earth clinging to their clothes, Damien turned to her. Lara, yes, if I asked you to stay, not because of a contract, not because of debt, but because I'm falling in love with you, what would you say? She blinked, the words landing like warm rain on her chest. I'd say, I've been waiting for you to say that. He stepped closer. I can't promise I'll be easy to love, he said, but I'll fight for you, for us. Lara smiled, tears filling her eyes. I don't need easy. I need real. Their lips met in the garden. No thunder, no storm. Just the quiet merging of two souls who had been bruised, buried, and reborn. The rain came back with vengeance the next day. Not a gentle drizzle, but a downpour that rattled windows, soaked the grounds, and filled the mansion with an eerie hush. Thunder rolled like drums of war, and lightning etched violent cracks across the Banana Island sky. Lara stood at the library window, arms folded, watching the water slam against the glass. Everything felt different now, raw, exposed. After Damien's confession and that kiss, there was no more hiding behind silence or shadows. But sometimes love doesn't arrive quietly. Sometimes it invites storms. A knock echoed through the hallway, too forceful to be staff. Moments later, Auntie Dora burst into the library, her face drained of color. Madam, she said breathlessly, there's a man at the gate. He says his name is Chuka. He's asking for you. Lara blinked. Chuka? I don't know any. But then the name hit her like a slap. Chuka Onu. Evelyn's cousin. She'd come across his name in the journal. Where's Damien? She asked, heart racing. Still in a board meeting, Dora replied. Shall I send security to handle him? No, Lara said firmly. I'll go. Chuka stood beneath a dripping umbrella at the mansion gates, his expression cocky and unpleasant. His eyes were too quick, too calculating. Lara stood opposite him, clutching her coat closed. I didn't come here for pleasantries, he said. I came to deliver a message. From whom? Lara asked. He smirked. Let's not play dumb, sweetheart. You're clever. I've read all about you. The nurse turned billionaire's bride. Quite the story. What do you want? I want you to understand that your husband is still a murderer. Evelyn didn't vanish. She escaped. Lara's blood ran cold. Chuka continued. She's alive. And if you think Damien has changed, you're a fool. She's coming back. And when she does, this whole empire you think you're part of will crumble. You're lying, Lara whispered. Am I? He leaned in. Ask yourself why Damien burned every piece of her clothing but kept the locket. Ask yourself why he still visits the lake house in secret. What lake house? But Chuka only smiled. You really thought you'd tame the monster? That's the thing about monsters, darling. They're never really asleep. They're just waiting for the right scream to wake them. With that, he turned and disappeared into the rain. That night, Lara confronted Damien. He had just stepped out of the shower, a towel wrapped around his waist, hair damp, the scar on his face glistening under the bathroom light. There's something I need to know, she said. He looked up, instantly alert. What is it? Chuka Onu came to the mansion today. Damien's jaw locked. What did he say? He says Evelyn's alive. Silence stretched between them. And? He asked. Is it true? Her voice cracked. Is she alive, Damien? He didn't answer. Do you still go to the lake house? She continued. The one you never told me about? Yes, he said finally. Lara flinched. But not because of what you think, he added. I kept it because it was the last place she didn't lie to me. The last place I remember us being real. Lara's throat tightened. And now? Now it's just a ruin I visit when I need to feel something. She turned away from him. Lara, he said softly, reaching for her hand. Evelyn might be alive. I don't know. After the fire there were rumors, sightings, whispers, but nothing concrete. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want the fear to return, because I want something in my life to finally be clean. She met his gaze. You should have trusted me, she said, because now I don't know what to believe. The storm kept her awake that night. Lara sat by the window, staring into the blackness, Evelyn's face forming in her mind like smoke. What if Chuka was right? What if Evelyn had planned her return? And what did it mean for everything she and Damien had built? The next morning, she received a brown envelope, slipped under her door. Inside, a single note. I'm watching. The roses weren't enough. Tell him I'm back. There was no signature, but Lara didn't need one. The handwriting matched the journal. It was Evelyn's. Lara stared at the note for hours. She didn't eat, didn't drink. The paper sat in her lap like a curse. Evelyn's jagged handwriting burned into her vision. I'm watching. The roses weren't enough. Tell him I'm back. Every letter reeked of malice, of a ghost who had never truly died, but waited in the walls, sharpening knives made of memory and revenge. When Damien returned from the office, Lara met him in the foyer, the envelope clenched in her fist. She sent this, she said quietly, handing it to him. He opened it, read it, said nothing. Lara stepped closer. You believe it now, don't you? She was always theatrical, he murmured, but she never wrote empty threats. So she's alive, Lara whispered. He nodded slowly. And you knew it was possible this whole time? I suspected, but I couldn't bear to say it aloud. Lara's voice shook. Why? Why keep it from me? Because I've spent years haunted by her shadow, and for the first time in forever, I was starting to live in the light. With you. Tears blurred her eyes. I'm not afraid of her, Lara said. I'm afraid of you hiding from me. Again. He stepped forward, took her hand. Then let's stop hiding. That night, Damien opened the West Wing to her fully. They walked the corridors where Evelyn once kept secrets. He showed Lara the studio, the basement, even the coded security room where private records were stored. She watched him dig through drawers until he found it, a digital folder on an encrypted flash drive. Videos, photos, bank statements, surveillance clips. All proof that Evelyn had staged her disappearance. She had withdrawn money weeks before the fire. Her passport had been used in Spain, then Morocco, and there was even grainy footage of her, months after her death, stepping into a black SUV with tinted windows outside a clinic in Marrakesh. She's been watching me, Damien said, waiting for the right moment. Why now? Lara asked. Why come back after all this time? Because I've moved on, because she sees you. Later, they sat in Damien's private lounge, a fire crackling in the hearth. He poured 2 glasses of wine, but neither of them touched it. Lara stared at the flames. If she comes back, she'll try to hurt me. She won't get near you, he said. She already has. He looked at her, pain flickering in his eyes. I'm not going to run, she said softly. Damien stiffened. I thought you would, he murmured. I wanted to, she admitted. I was halfway packed this morning. But I realized if I leave, I'm letting her win, and I'm betraying everything we've built. He stared at her for a long time. Then without a word, he dropped to his knees in front of her. I don't deserve this, he said, voice hoarse. But I want it. I want you. And if standing between you and danger is what it takes, I'll do it until my last breath. Lara cupped his face in her hands, her thumbs grazing the edges of his scar. You don't need to earn me, Damien. You just need to be honest with me. He nodded, eyes glassy. I promise. She leaned in. And this time, when their lips met, it wasn't brokenness that bound them. It was choice. It was defiance. It was love blooming in the middle of war. The following day, security around the mansion doubled. Cameras were checked, motion detectors recalibrated, and staff were questioned about any unfamiliar faces. That night, Lara returned to the greenhouse. She stood among the roses, Evelyn's last gift and warning, and waited. And then she saw her, a silhouette beyond the garden wall. Just a flash of long hair, a coat, a figure standing perfectly still. Lara didn't move. Neither did the figure. After a minute, it turned and disappeared. No attempt to breach the wall. Just a message. I'm here. When Lara told Damien what she saw, he didn't doubt her. She's testing us, he said. She wants you afraid. I'm not, Lara replied. But the truth was, she was. Not just of Evelyn, but of what this meant for their future, for the healing they had only just begun. She clutched Damien's hand tightly. We fight together now, she said. His grip tightened around hers. Yes, he whispered, together. It was a Wednesday afternoon, unusually quiet in Banana Island. The sun pressed against the windows in lazy streaks, and for a moment, everything inside the mansion felt still, too still. Lara was in the study when it happened. She was reviewing files for the Uzo Foundation's next charity clinic, hoping distraction would dull the tension in her chest. The memory of Evelyn's shadow in the garden still clung to her like fog. A knock came at the front door, sharp, measured. Auntie Dora opened it. Lara heard no greeting, only silence. Then a whisper, then Dora's voice, trembling. Madam, it's her. Lara rose slowly, her body numb, the walls spinning around her as she made her way to the foyer. There she stood, Evelyn, alive, and terrifying in her calm. She wore a fitted white pantsuit. Her hair was pulled back in a high bun, elegant and cruel. Her skin was paler than Lara remembered from photos, but her eyes, those eyes, burned with something vicious and electric. Lara's breath hitched. Evelyn! You must be the new Mrs. Uzo, Evelyn said, her voice smooth like glass dragged across stone. I've been dying to meet you. Lara stepped forward. You're not supposed to be here. Oh, I think I am, Evelyn replied, flashing a smile. This house is mine. No, you forfeited that when you disappeared, when you faked your death. Evelyn shrugged. Did I, though? Or was I just running from a man who destroyed me? You tried to destroy him first, Lara snapped. Evelyn's eyes flared. And what has he told you? That I was cruel? That I set the fire? You admitted it in your journal. Evelyn tilted her head. Oh, darling, journals are just stories we tell ourselves. Doesn't mean they're true. Damien's voice boomed from the stairway. Enough. Both women turned. He descended the stairs slowly, but every step carried weight. You don't belong here, Evelyn, he said. She laughed softly. You used to beg me to come back. That was before I learned who you really were. Was it? She replied, stepping closer. Or is that just what you need to believe, so you can sleep beside your new nurse-turned-saint? Damien's jaw tightened. Why are you here? To collect what's mine, she said. I want my share of Uzo Enterprises. The house, the foundation, Everything you owe me. You're legally dead, he said coldly. You're owed nothing. I'm very much alive, she smiled, stepping closer to Lara, and the press will be thrilled to know just how alive I am, especially when they find out who's been funding your precious charity events with laundered accounts. Lara stepped in front of her, fury vibrating through her bones. You want to burn everything down again? She said. Go ahead, but this time Damien's not alone, and I'm not afraid of you. Evelyn leaned in, her voice low. Oh, honey, everyone's afraid of me. They just pretend they're not. That's how I win. And then without another word, she turned and walked out. The next 24 hours moved like a storm. Evelyn's reappearance triggered a legal and PR emergency. Within hours, rumors swirled across Lagos. The ghost wife returns, the billionaire lied, the mansion hides murder. Damien's company stocks dipped, investors panicked, board members called emergency meetings. Inside the mansion, Lara stood her ground. She met with lawyers, held calls with foundation sponsors, stood beside Damien through every chaotic hour. He didn't ask her to stay. She just did. One night, as Damien stared blankly at his office wall, Lara entered quietly and sat beside him. You're not losing everything, she said. You're rebuilding it, with the truth this time. I thought I could outrun her, he whispered, but she was always 3 steps ahead. She came back for war, Lara said, but she didn't expect you to have someone standing beside you. He turned to her. I don't know how to thank you. She smiled. Then don't. Just fight. Not with silence, but with truth. A week later, Evelyn was found dead. A car crash on the Lagos-Ibadan expressway. Speeding, no brakes. Her body was identified by dental records. No foul play, just reckless driving. Or maybe fate finally caught up to her. When the news reached the mansion, Damien didn't speak. He simply walked to the rose garden and stood in the rain for hours, staring at the flowers Evelyn once planted, the ones she later used to mock them. Lara joined him quietly, slipping her hand into his. She's gone, he said, voice hollow, but it still doesn't feel like peace. Because peace isn't silence, Lara replied. It's what you build in the silence. He looked at her, eyes full of grief, gratitude, and something else, hope. He kissed her forehead, and for the first time in years, the monster faded. It had been 2 months since Evelyn's death, 2 months since her name stopped haunting headlines, since the gates of the Uzo mansion remained closed to reporters and whispers, since Damien and Lara began rebuilding, brick by painful brick, the fragile thing they once thought impossible, a real life. The legal storms had passed, the company had stabilized. Damien gave a single, powerful press conference. No tears, no theatrics, just truth. He admitted he had loved a woman who broke him. That silence had cost him everything. That healing began when he stopped pretending monsters only lived in the dark. People listened. More importantly, people forgave. And for the first time in years, Damien forgave himself. Lara stood in the middle of the West Wing one morning, dressed in a soft yellow sundress, sunlight flooding through the wide windows. The room had changed. It no longer held portraits of Evelyn or broken memories. The walls had been repainted, the heavy red drapes replaced with airy whites. In the center of the room now hung a single canvas, a new portrait. It was Lara. But this one was different from the secret painting Damien had created before they met. This Lara smiled. Her eyes were alive, her shoulders strong, her beauty not ethereal, but rooted. A woman who had walked through fire and decided to bloom anyway. Damien stepped in behind her, quietly. You like it? He asked. She turned to face him, smiling. I love it. It's the first time I've painted with peace, he said. Every brush stroke was like learning to breathe again. They stood there, silent for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a small velvet box. Wait, she said, breath-catching. We're already married. That wasn't a real marriage, he replied softly. That was desperation in a contract. He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold band engraved with the word chosen. This time, he said, I want you to marry me for love. Not because of your brother, not because of your fear, but because you choose me, monster, scars, and all. Tears filled her eyes. She didn't hesitate. I do, she whispered. He slipped the ring onto her finger. I do too, he said. The second wedding was private. No photographers, no press, just 10 people. Friends, a few staff, and Auntie Dora who cried the loudest. Lara wore a white silk gown with a soft train that shimmered like moonlight. Her hair was curled and pinned with a rose Damien had picked from the greenhouse. He wore a navy blue suit, crisp and timeless. They married in the rose garden, right where Evelyn had once watched them from the shadows. Now there were no ghosts, just sunlight, just wind, just love. As Damien read his vows, his voice trembled. I once believed I would never be loved without being feared, he said. Then you came in, angry, brave, uninvited, and loved me anyway. Lara smiled through her tears. You weren't a monster, she replied. You were a man waiting for someone to look closely enough and not flinch. Later that evening, they danced alone in the sitting room. No music, no audience, just two people swaying beneath the chandelier, barefoot, laughing softly. You know what I realized? Lara murmured against his chest. What? You've never called me darling, or baby, or even love. He pulled back, grinning. You want pet names now? I want whatever comes naturally. He tucked a curl behind her ear. All right then, my heart. She blinked. That's what you are, he said. My heart, the only part of me that still beats. She kissed him, slow and certain. And in that moment, every door in that mansion, the locked ones, the haunted ones, even the ones buried in his soul, opened. Because Lara had not just married the monster, she had freed the man inside. 1 year later, the mansion no longer whispered. It sang. Laughter echoed down its marble halls. Real, unforced. Music played in the garden. The staff smiled more, spoke freely, and kept vases of fresh lilies in every hallway. The once haunted greenhouse was now a sanctuary of orchids and sunflowers, carefully nurtured by Lara herself. The monster was gone. And in his place stood a man who had finally come home to himself. Damien Uzo. The rose garden was in full bloom that morning. Birds flitted from tree to tree. The sky stretched wide and cloudless over Banana Island. Lara sat on a bench beneath the archway, dressed in a simple white linen dress, her belly round beneath the fabric. One hand rested gently over it, the other holding a book she'd been trying to read for an hour. She couldn't focus, because the baby was moving again, kicking lightly, as if reminding her that life didn't pause for perfect moments. You're restless, she whispered, rubbing her belly. Just like your father. I heard that. She looked up, smiling as Damien walked toward her, barefoot in the garden, a steaming cup of tea in one hand and a fresh croissant in the other. For my queen, he said, bowing theatrically. Flattery before 9 a.m.? What have I done to deserve this? She teased. You married me, he said simply, taking a seat beside her. They sat quietly, listening to the wind. Lara looked at him, then down at her stomach. She'll know everything, she whispered. About you, about the fire, about Evelyn. All of it. Damien nodded. And when she asked if I was a monster? I'll tell her you were a man who once lived in a cage of other people's fear, she said, and who chose love, even when it was hard. He turned to her, his eyes soft. You saved me. No, she corrected. You saved yourself. I just held the mirror. He leaned in and kissed her gently. Later that afternoon, they walked through the West Wing, which now held a mini gallery of Damien's new works. None of them featured fire, scars, or shadows. They were full of light, color, stories. One was a portrait of a woman in labor, sweating, wild-eyed, powerful. Another showed a little girl running barefoot in the rain, laughing. Each painting was a chapter of the life Damien had never thought he deserved. But now, it was his. Lara paused at one canvas tucked in the corner. It was unfinished. She raised an eyebrow. This new one, who's it supposed to be? He smiled. You, holding her. She's not even born yet. I see her already, he said, placing a hand over her belly. You'll hold her like the world depends on it. It does. That evening, they sat by the fireplace with cups of zobo and a tray of roasted ground nuts. The air was cool, the lights were low. Lara turned to him. Do you still think of Evelyn? He didn't flinch, didn't retreat. Yes, he said, sometimes, but not with pain, just clarity. She was a storm. And you, he said, brushing her cheek, are the calm after. Lara leaned into his touch. I'm glad I didn't run. I'm glad I let you stay. They kissed, and when they pulled apart, they both looked at the flickering flames. Not with fear, but with peace. Because fire had once destroyed this house, but now it warmed it. And where ghosts once lingered, love lived louder.